First talk will be Dan Robbins, and he'll be talking about why you need to experiment with collaboration. So.
Hello. So yeah, as I say, I'm Dan Robbins. I'm art director at Investis Digital. Today I'm going to be talking around the idea of collaboration, specifically around the idea of experimenting with it. Bit of a caveat here. The question mark, which was on the original event, was a little bit of a kind of Ron Burgundy-esque auto cue mistake. So it was not really supposed to be a question, but more of a statement. But we're all there anyway, so I thought I'd have the consistency. But the idea of experimentation and certainly around collaboration has always been something that's kind of fascinated me. The idea of collective creativity and why is it that as a collective you can be more powerful from a creative perspective than you can as an individual. It's always kind of puzzled me as to why in education the emphasis seems to kind of be more on the individual. So we're kind of pigeonholed into kind of thinking, well, we aspire to be maybe individuals like the next Einstein or Steve Jobs, but kind of forgetting often that these people kind of sit at the top of an iceberg, and it's generally the kind of teams which we should probably aspire to be part of. I think there's kind of a tendency within our industry to look at the idea of collaboration, or certainly sit in a meeting and everyone's kind of shouting out ideas, bouncing off each other. You've probably got a whiteboard, certainly in Investis, for contributing to the world shortage of post-it notes. And just essentially combat collaboration. And I think to a degree it probably is. You are getting some sort of creative output of the collective there. But I think in the reality of the situation is, when we look at that, there's 5 or 6 individuals, say, who have a potentially collective opportunity to work together to come up with creative ideas. And rather than that happen from a diverse set of backgrounds and disciplines, coming up with something new, we end up quite often with 5 or 6 individuals competing against one another. And the idea of collaboration, has been something, from the beginnings of time, which has built a foundation of human existence. The idea of civilization or infrastructure has all been built from co-working and working with each other. And somewhere along the way, obviously, the idea of competition kind of competes against that, and sometimes it's a case of kind of looking at collaboration and a meeting which we would call collaborative and saying, well, is this really collaborative, or is this actually more kind of along the lines of competing? Because often what we find is that there's a lot of people in the room who have got the strongest personalities or the most senior stakeholders, and they're often the people whose agenda gets driven the most in those meetings and the outcomes that come out of it. And often we found that people with their quieter personalities perhaps are actually less likely to be able to push their ideas across, but could just as likely have a very strong creative idea. So that's something that we've kind of looking to explore about how we can best drive the ability to be able to extract creative ideas from a room full of people. At the end of the day, you have a 1-hour session, and I read something quite interesting the other day, which I kind of didn't really think about in here, but it's quite an interesting point around the idea of what we consider a 1-hour meeting with 5 individuals isn't necessarily a 1-hour meeting. This is the equivalent of a 5-hour meeting if you have 5 people in there. So it costs the business 5 hours rather than 1. And actually, when we're kind of being asked to be creative on cue as designers, UX designers, developers, or whoever it may be, that's where I think we need to be more experimental with our approach in order to get the most out of that. There's been 2 defining events in the last 6 months of my life, which the experiences have kind of led me to kind of outlook, or certainly a different outlook on the idea of collaboration and working together. One of them is not a picture of me in a nightgown. I had a surgery a couple of months ago, which was essentially to remove a growth from one of my vocal cords, which is why I sound particularly husky right over the microphone. So apologies if you're struggling to make out what I'm saying. But it's interesting when you look back in the kind of for the future, looking into why these effects these events had a profound effect on what you do. And often it's about kind of looking back and seeing how the dots join. And part of the therapy that I had after that surgery was essentially learning to use my voice again. So working with a voice therapist to slowly build up the strength of my voice and being able to communicate properly again. And there's a very slow process, but it's a very experimental process, bizarrely enough. It's actually led me to various conclusions around how I'd like to approach collaboration and working with other people in a more experimental way in the future. And the second one is India, and this is a little bit more kind of in line with the original kind of event bio. Bizarrely enough, actually, around this everything, I didn't tell Tally this, but when she asked me to do this talk, ironically, I couldn't actually talk at all, but I didn't think it was a very good idea to tell her that, just in case. Well, very good for confidence on the talk. But around the India side of things, we, as a business, Investis, we've gone from strength to strength. We started in London. We have offices in the early 2000s, actually. We have offices in Scotland, New York, Arizona, Scandinavia, and India. And I've been lucky enough to visit the India offices twice over the past 6 months. We have a team there. Didn't really know too much around the team, and I think the company in general is on a drive and to see how not only can we be more collaborative with our clients, but also how can we be more collaborative as a global organisation. It's something that historically I think we've kind of struggled with to a degree. We kind of work in silos within our own markets, and it's difficult to kind of draw upon the learnings of other people's experiences with their clients and their markets. And often, the India team unfortunately kind of fell by the wayside. They're actually kind of known as the design support at the beginning. And it's something that, unfortunately, it kind of become a reputation of being creatively inferior. And it's something that we as an organisation and as a design team in the UK wanted to challenge that perception and think, well, is it actually that these people are creatively inferior, or perhaps is it the way in which we're working with them which is producing the results that we're not liking? So the first thing we started looking at was the idea of creativity. I think it's a huge misconception which is quite common around the idea that people often mistake creativity for design. And it's quite easy to see why. I mean, when you have beautiful shots like this, when the colour starts out and the typography starts becoming more refined and the experience really comes to life, that's when we kind of, unfortunately, get into this problem of saying, well, that's the creative part of the project, let's get the creatives on it. But the reality of the situation is anyone can be creative. I firmly believe that creativity can come from anywhere. It can come from a project manager managing to squeeze down an extra week so that you can work on the design phase, or a UX researcher finding out how you might be able to go about a project in a different way. And the idea of creativity, fundamentally, from a psychological perspective, is essentially just the idea of challenging assumptions. It's about taking something that already exists and challenging that and creating something new out of that. One of my favourite definitions of this, and my friend kind of go with me all the time because I quite like it, I actually learned it, but essentially, there's a surrealist artist, you should definitely check out his work, it's amazing. It's kind of Dali-esque, but Max Ernst is also a philosopher, or was. And his definition of creativity is really something quite beautiful. So I'm going to say it's essentially creativity is the marvelous capacity to grasp mutually distinct realities and draw a spark from their juxtaposition. And there's a bit of a mouthful, and I quite enjoyed learning it as well, but it is essentially the truth. So in layman's terms, what that really means is the idea of being able to take two distinct ideas or realities and create a new one by smashing them together and seeing what comes out of that. So if we look back to the idea of what creativity really is, then of course that gives people of any background and any discipline the option to have creative ideas to a project. Linda Hill, and she's got a little bit of a bland TED talk, but if you can get through it, it's quite interesting. But she talks around people having too much of a tendency to work in silo. And her book, actually, Collective Genius, is really quite interesting. She's a Harvard professor, and she kind of co-authored this book. And it challenges the idea of having individuals in organisations which are essentially what we call the Don Draper effect. So working in advertising agencies back in the 60s, you could kind of rely on one or two creative people that would be able to kind of steer the agency in the right creative direction, somehow just know exactly what the client wanted. And I think that perception is changing. She talks around the idea of challenging the solo genius, like I touched upon earlier in the educational side of things. And she says, well, actually, the collective genius is a far more powerful tool that we can unlock through organisations, just with the idea of how we go about collaborating. The first bit. No excuse for my operations. It's the idea of habituation. It's a really interesting subject. It's actually a word that I hadn't really heard too much of before. And it's actually my speech therapist it kind of introduced me to the idea of habituation. I mean, it's something that we're all very much aware of, but it's not something that we necessarily notice. And that's kind of the whole point of habituation. The way that Tony Fadell, who, by the way, quite ironically describes using an apple, because Tony Fadell was one of the co-designers or collaborators of the iPod with Johnny Ive and Steve Jobs. He touches upon the idea of habituation as something which leads you to not notice the things that are obvious to others. So he kind of puts this in as far as, you have an apple. He used to be able, for the first 20 years of his life, he used to pick it up and just look at the apple and say, I want to take a bite out of it. Now suddenly, someone came along with the idea of going, well, maybe we can categorise the apples, or maybe we can put a barcode on the apple by putting a little sticker on them. And he said the first sort of 10 apples that he bought in that respect, he picked it up and he get kind of pissed off, having to kind of stick his nails in there and pick off the sticker in order to eat the apple. And there was kind of an annoying procedure which is there for maybe 5, 10 of the kind of first apples you eat after that begins. After about 10 of those, you stop noticing that. He said you just start picking up an apple now, and he doesn't even realise the fact that he's picking up the sticker before he's biting into it. He stopped realising what the problem is there, and he started to habituate around it to a point where he doesn't even notice. And that's what I kind of wanted to touch upon with the idea of creativity and collaboration. Often when we get in a position where we're quite comfortable with the ideas we're creating through the use of design sprints or different methodologies with design and coming up with ideas, we often kind of forget that we're going into the same kind of routes as we did before. I think it was Einstein that said something along the lines of, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And I think that's kind of reminiscent when we're talking around collaboration. It certainly was when I talk around the need to experiment, actually the wrong way around. It certainly was when it comes to the need to experiment. And as I kind of touched upon earlier, one of the kind of profound areas of this operation that I had, which looking back on it, I'm kind of joining the dots a little bit more now, was around, as I said here, I'm a voice therapy graduate. But essentially, what my voice therapist said was, habitually, you kind of get into a habit of how we use our voice. And that may or may not be right for the way in which it should be used. Because voice therapy is, to a degree, a science. You look at the idea of how you blow air through your diaphragm, it goes past your vocal cords, causing a vibration which creates a sound wave, which essentially is the sound that you make out of your voice. And she says, well, that's all very well, but the muscles inside you can obviously have a profound effect on the way that your voice is kind of coming out. And so there's a million different techniques which you can go through, and it's very much the case of experimenting with them in order to find something that works for you. I found that I use a voice therapy technique, such as, I had some weird ones as well, my friends can tell you, around blowing bubbles into water and doing some weird stuff with your lips and talking with your tongue out. It's all sorts of weird stuff, but the experimental element of it was what made it successful. Because one exercise that would work for me one week, the next week would start working and have any effect at all. One exercise I could do, it would loosen up my vocal cords to the point by the end of the session, I was able to talk more clearly than I could prior to the operation. I tried the same exercise the next week and it would have absolutely no effect. So what we ended up going down was a route of, well, give me more and more exercises that I can try and experiment with in order to, throughout the week, just try different things so as not to get into this habitual cycle where my body becomes used to the way in which I'm talking and therefore falls back into the old way of this husky, kind of cool, But this is where it kind of goes back to India. And the way that I kind of went about it was, well, if we go down to this habitual design kind of route, well, has anyone really tried to work with them in a different way than we ever have? Has anyone tried to brief them in a different way? One of the reasons why they potentially creatively inferior or considered that was because maybe we just send the same shit to them and expect different results. And I kind of went there not really knowing what I was going to do. I went on with a few books and a few kind of experimental techniques of how I wanted to work with them. And this is a photo actually of working with a few of the guys there where we kind of set up a war room, we just done some crazy ace exercises. And I'd love to go into some of the methodologies, and I actually had intended to kind of talk around some of the methodologies and experiments and the tools that we use. And we were starting to use more of a lot in Investis, not just on a global scale, but also internally in the UK team. Unfortunately, I don't really have too much time to do that, but I'm more than happy to kind of talk around some of those things we've been doing afterwards. But we found that actually, through being more experimental and actually working on some of the most high-profile projects in the business at the time, we were able to work with a team of people who was previously considered creatively inferior and come up with some of the designs which we would kind of consider some of our flagship websites now. And that was just purely down to the idea of being able to challenge perception, but also consider, well, is it the right people that we've got in the room? We've got different QA people, we even have the managing director in charge of 500 people in that organisation in India, sitting in one of our meetings talking about what colour we should do a button. And those kind of like techniques and experimental ways of collaborating were what led us to kind of different solutions which we wouldn't have come up with working in silo or as individuals. And we certainly wouldn't have come up with if we had just given it to them and sent it over the fence. This is a book, by the way, which you should definitely check out. It's 100 Ways to Research Complex Problems. You know, there's so many different, there's 100 ways just out there, and we've tried so many of them, and some of them seem bizarre, they're not going to really do much, but honestly, I really would check it out, because it's more about how you experiment and what you're doing that actually kind of gives you the interesting information that you can look for. But that's not all we're looking at in terms of collaboration and Investis. Actually, something that we're really kind of keen and driving at the moment is the idea of collaborating with our clients. That didn't actually mean to put that we are moment, that was more of a cue, but essentially, we all have moments as designers of feedback such as, oh, can we go above the phone please? Oh, can we change the colour a little? Can we make the logo a little bit bigger? I actually had some feedback not that long ago saying, can we make it more creative? And you know, it's not helpful feedback, but it's kind of unsurprising really when we're taking a stab in the dark at a creative approach, when we haven't extracted the information that we need from the client. There's absolutely no way in hell, with the best designer in the world, or the best will in the world, that you're going to be able to understand the client's business as much as they do. And it's about how you extract that information which informs your creative approach, which is the important thing. And so we started working with companies in a more experimental way. This week, in fact, I was working with a very established organisation, a FTSE 100 in fact. They have their own in-house UX teams, their own in-house design teams, developers and everything else. But what we were able to do is approach it from a more experimental angle, to look at something from different perspectives that they hadn't seen before, objectively look at their business, compare it with other businesses that we're working with in an experimental way, and consider, well, how best would you approach your brand in the future? And actually they found that a lot of the information that was coming out of there through some of these techniques that at first in the beginning of the session seemed perhaps bizarre to them, they were the techniques which were actually extracting the information that we needed, because it wasn't a question that they'd been asked before by their internal teams. We're getting closer with India, and certainly with our clients as well, and we're certainly not there. There's a lot of work to do, and there's challenges that we kind of find with these ways of working on an everyday basis, particularly with the India design team. It's something that my boss and I have discussed at length about how we can continue this momentum and be more experimental, but in a remote fashion. And it's certainly starting to have effect on how we work with the other offices as well, like in the States, and the importance that we put on physical visits over just using the tools at our disposal. But I think the key thing for us is that it's not supposed to be a finished process. This is supposed to be experimental. The whole premise of this is that the more experimental we are, the more we can essentially find and unlock that we would have done previously. Thank you.
Hello? Yes. So yeah, I run from the other side of the room for this, but so if anyone have any questions for Danny, you have like 5 minutes now, and you can get all your questions out.
I must have rounded
I could probably hear.
Any examples of like what your favorite method?
Yeah, so I didn't actually have a slide of this, but obviously I was going to a little run through earlier. I was like, I'm going like 35 minutes or something here. So one of my